Today, Rutt Bridges will talk about the exciting new development of driverless vehicles. He has a BS in physics, an MS in geophysical sciences from Georgia Tech. He exited a successful analytics software startup 2 years ago and is now focused on research to better understand the economic and social impact of disruptive innovations. He is a far-sighted visionary, and I want to personally thank him for spreading the word about the future of technology improvements and the impact on our lives as a result. And thank you, Rutt. The driverless cars come at a time when I'll be told that because of my age, I'll not be able to drive. But the good news is that I plan to get a driverless car. Timing is everything.
Good afternoon. First, thanks so much for inviting me here to talk about driverless cars. It's a subject that's close to my heart. As Lee said, I did a lot of research in disruptive technologies, and I really think this is going to be a very disruptive technology. It will be greatly beneficial to a lot of people, but there will also be people that it's going to hurt. And so I'll try to talk about that broader spectrum of issues. But I do want to say that I don't own stock in any of these companies that will be discussed today. And I've gone out of my way to not have what we call in the venture capital world skin in the game, because you're not neutral if that's the case. And so I will start by pulling this out of my pocket, which I should have done earlier. What are these vehicles? Well, robo-taxis, if you want to think about the idea of a driverless taxi, it's essentially Uber on steroids. It's the same sort of situation with Uber where you use a cell phone, basically, to call up that vehicle, and it shows up in a few minutes at your front door. And one of the most disruptive things about these vehicles is the price. The driver is the greatest cost by far in Uber or any in the transportation network companies. Without having to pay for that driver, and with the decreasing cost of a lot of the technology that goes into this car, I'm projecting out for 2020, which I think is about the time when these will become more common, although some will be out there sooner than that. But 28 cents a mile if you ride by yourself, and if you'll share that ride, 14 cents a mile. So you can go 10 miles to a job for $1.40. That's going to have an impact on a lot of low-income people, for one thing. But all of that at a 35% pre-tax profit margin. I come from a venture capital background, and so I basically built a business plan to try to understand where the costs were in this, and it is a good business. In fact, if 50% of the market were using these kinds of vehicles, that would be about a $400 billion revenue business overall. More importantly, these have a compelling value proposition. When you look at basically whether this company is going to be successful, one of the first things you have to think about is what value are they bringing in at what price. That is a value proposition. So let's take a look at that. So it is safe. We'll talk about safety later. Efficient transportation for half to a fourth the cost of owning a car. It is low stress, and basically it's door-to-door service available 24/7 while you sit in the back and read, relax, do whatever you want to do. Less congestion, faster commutes, less pollution, no parking, and none of the hassles of owning a vehicle. So this video will give you an idea of what some of these vehicles may look like. There'll be a variety of different
Today, we have something extra
vehicles.
special for you guys, and you guys will be people outside of our team and outside of Google to ever ride in it.
It's a Google promotional video, but you can see what
Isn't that cute?
it's still useful.
Okay, Annie, here we go. All right, Connie, let's go. There's no steering wheel in the way.
I know that freaks a lot of people out.
It was a big decision for us to go and start building our purpose-built vehicles for this. And really, they're prototype vehicles. They were a chance for us to explore what does it really mean to have a self-driving vehicle. But in the small amount of time we've been working on it, we have functional prototypes, and that's exciting.
It's really cool. It was like really kind of a space age experience.
Okay. Hooray. We're like comedians. Yeah.
You said relax. You don't need to do nothing. It knows when it needs to stop. It knows when it needs to go.
It actually rides better than my own car.
Yes, sure.
What she really liked was that it slowed down before it went around a curve and then accelerated
In the
curve. She's always trying to get me to do it that way.
That's the way I learned in a high school driver's ed.
So if I had a self-driving car, I could spend more time hanging out with my kids or helping them with their homework, even just tending to them, finding out how their day was and not having to wait till you get home and have dinner and all that. So it'll be good.
Human feeling of it is very well engineered, and it is very smooth. There's nothing that makes you feel the least bit threatened. It's impressive. I'm totally in love with this whole concept.
Our lives are made up of lots and lots of little things. And a lot of those little things for most people have to do with getting from place to place. And in order to connect and do things, be with people, go places that they need to go and do things. And so there's a big part of my life that's missing, and there's a big part of my life that a self-driving vehicle would bring back to me.
This is the first step for us, and it's really exciting to see the progress we've made. The opportunity for people to just move around and not worry about it, it's going to be incredibly empowering and incredibly powerful for people.
I love this.
Yeah, Google. Okay. So, these are going to be electric vehicles. You may ask yourself, well, why are they going to be electric vehicles? It's basically an economic issue. If you look at a business, you look at the operating costs of that business, gasoline would have to get down to about 65 cents a gallon before it could be as cost effective as electric vehicles. I don't even believe that's going to happen anytime soon. So, falling battery cost. Okay, battery costs have been, with this new gigafactory that Elon Musk is building, they're falling pretty rapidly. There's 3 different vehicles coming out in 2017 that will have ranges that are greater than 200 miles. And so by 2020, mileage range is not going to be much of an issue. Long life. Electric motors will run for hundreds of thousands of miles with zero maintenance. And they don't even use oil. I mean, it's brushless electric technology. And in fact, to learn more about this, I bought a Nissan Leaf. And my next service interval on my Nissan Leaf is in 30,000 miles. So why? Well, if you look at all the things that robotaxis and electric vehicles don't have that internal combustion engines have, that whole list that you'll see up here is where a lot of the maintenance comes in for vehicles. Economics is going to drive adoption as much as anything else. If you look at the cost per 12,000 miles, Consumer Reports does annual surveys of all of their members, and these are the different components that go into that. Most people, if you ask them what their car costs to operate, they'll tell you what the mileage is and what gasoline costs. The greatest cost is depreciation. Fuel, maintenance, insurance, interest, and taxes all come into play in this. The cost of that single, solo ride in a robotaxi basically will save over ownership of a car over $4,700 a year. And if you'll share a ride, it's more like closer to $6,500 a year. And so think of, for a lot of people, how much of a difference in their life that will make. For families, 19% of their budget goes to transportation. There are better things to do with those after-tax dollars. So will they be safe? Well, Google has been using these cars for about 7 years. They've done about 1.5 million miles so far. They've had 18 accidents and 1 minor injury in all that time. 14 of those accidents were low speed, being rear-ended. And a lot of those accidents were the sort of things that never get reported. They're really, they got barely touched by someone's side view mirror recently, and that's reported as an accident. The Google car was in fact at fault only one time, and within 2 weeks they had analyzed that accident, changed their software, and delivered that to every car in the fleet. So I wish teenagers could figure out a way to do that. So here's a look at the one accident where they actually had an injury. And if you look, the white car here is the Google car. This is the trailing car. And you'll see as that trailing car, he never touched his brakes. Can anybody guess what that guy was doing that never touched his brakes? And how big a problem is that today? So this past year, 2015, over 38,000 people died in car crashes, vehicular crashes. Almost 4.5 million people were seriously injured. Those are numbers. It's very hard to sort of visualize numbers like that. So imagine that a 737 crashes on a Monday, and then imagine it crashes all the way, another one crashes every day until Friday, 5 days a week for a year. That's not even 38,000 lives lost. Amazing, amazing number. But 94% of those accidents are caused by us. And there are 4 main reasons. And those reasons are distraction, drowsiness, drunkenness, and driver error. And these vehicles do not have those problems. So let's take a look at this video. This is another Google video.
I'm Priscilla, one of the test drivers on the Google self-driving car project. Our team is responsible for keeping the cars and other people safe while on the road, and for providing feedback on how they perform in the real world. A big part of our job is to go out into the world and uncover all the potential scenarios that a car might encounter. Then we help the engineers teach the car how to best navigate each one. Here are some examples of situations that we regularly encounter on the streets of Mountain View, California. We've taught the vehicle to recognize and navigate through construction zones. Our sensors spot the orange signs and cones early to alert the car of the lane blockage ahead, and we can change lanes safely. You'll also notice the vehicle typically moves to keep a safe distance away from large obstacles, like this truck stopped on the side of the road. Now we're approaching a railroad crossing, which requires special care. Notice the red fence and railroad sign that appears to the computer as we approach the intersection. This means that we'll wait until the tracks are clear of other vehicles before proceeding. Our cars treat cyclists as a special category of moving object. Watch in this example, when the cyclist holds up his arm, our software detects the hand signal and predicts his movement into our lane. The car knows to continue yielding to the cyclist passing by, even when he changes his mind, multiple times. We still have more work to do, but it's fun to see how many situations we can now handle smoothly and naturally. See you on the road.
So that's kind of how the car sees the world, those images. And this is an older video. They're really a lot better at this now than they were when that video was made. I do use Google's videos a lot because they just do a good job of producing these videos. There are a lot of other companies that are working on this technology. So congestion. How do these cars improve the situation for congestion? Well, if you look at it, there's 2 main drivers. There is accidents and road construction. And accidents are going to be a lot fewer, and we will not need to expand our roads as much with these kinds of vehicles. And I'll talk some about why that is. Robotaxis communicate, for one thing, with each other, so they know where there are congested areas. And what they will do is they'll automatically route around those using surface streets without any human intervention. They know where that is because all of the information on the speed and the position of every one of those vehicles is being shared with each other. So cheap and simple ride sharing with HVO lane access. If you want to really do something about congestion, drive on the interstate, driving in during the day, look around and see how many cars have more than one person in them. It's single occupancy vehicles. But if you can get there just as easily at half price by sharing the ride with one other person, that could be a very attractive option. Also using those HOV lanes. Platooning by small light vehicles. Well, what is platooning? This is going to be a little hard to grasp, I'm afraid. But these vehicles, since they communicate with each other, they're actually able to ride with a small gap between the cars. And when the front car slows down, within a thousandth of a second, every other car slows down because they're all wirelessly connected and they're talking to each other. When it speeds up, they speed up, just like almost like a school of fish moving through the water. And platooning is not some space age thing. Mercedes is actually doing this with 18-wheelers right now. Volvo is as well. And there are a number of cars that are, automakers that are working on this with more conventional cars. Here is the problem with single occupancy vehicles and why this idea of getting people to share is so important. These are 200 people in 177 cars. This is 200 people without the cars. There's a lot of, that steel and metal and everything is taking up a lot of room. And if you can get those people to get in a rail car on light rail, like we have an abundance of here in Denver, that's what it looks like, which is quite a difference. It is Denver's largest and most efficient electric vehicle is light rail. So the concept is you could use these vehicles to feed light rail stations. And you could basically do a just-in-time delivery of passengers to those stations. So they get out, they hop on the light rail. Particularly here in Denver, the transit in the center of Denver is really excellent and it's free. And so it's really an attractive model there, but this would work in a lot of other rail stations if these same vehicles were available on the other end as well. We could carry twice as many people as we carry in our light rail now if we had a really something that was door-to-door kind of a service. So robo-taxi adoption rate. Who's going to buy these things? Who's going to buy them? Well, you're not going to buy them. You're going to buy miles, not metal. Some people may choose to buy the vehicles, and that's perfectly fine. But for a lot of people, especially millennials, and especially urban millennials, they really don't want to buy cars. They don't want the hassle of owning cars. And they like it just, the concept is, believe me, going over very well with that group. So early adopters, millennials, seniors. Seniors are always late adopters of new technologies. But guess what? When your kids come to you and say, Mom, Dad, I need the keys, right? You can give up your keys without giving up your freedom. Not having dependable transportation is a lot of the reasons why so many of us as we age wind up not being able to remain in our homes. The disabled community, I was at a hearing in California at their DMV where I was testifying, and they were there in droves. They're so eager for this because it does provide them with that freedom. For low-income people, they really have an opportunity to get a better job with reliable transportation and spend more time with their families. And the alcohol impaired. We all know who they are. So commuters, kids, and businesses, that's sort of the next group. Then the skeptics will be the last to arrive. But for people that truly own their cars, there's no reason why they have to give them up. And there will still be lots of cars. It will be a mixed environment. And they won't all be those little boxy cars that you saw the video on. This is Mercedes' concept for a robo-limo, where all the seats face each other and everyone has a pleasant time on the way to dinner. Who benefits the most? Well, the public, obviously, for a lot of the reasons we've talked about. Seniors, disabled, low-income people, taxpayers and government. It costs a lot to add a lane to I-25 or I-70. Just an incredible amount of money. The environment, cleaner, greener downtowns. Developers, this is a little bit of a surprise, but I gave a talk at Urban Land Institute in Atlanta. And in Atlanta, 31% of the land area in downtown Atlanta is taken up by parking. These vehicles will drop people off and go to the next person they have to pick up. Or if there's nothing going on, they'll be directed to areas where the analytic software that's managing all of these cars tells them the most likely demand will be for vehicles. Economic stimulus and consumer savings, about $600 billion a year that will go back into the economy through the money that all of the people that use these vehicles save. So who is most at risk? What's the other side of that coin? You know, there's not much way around this for a lot of automakers, because one of these robo-taxis serves about 7 people, and other estimates are higher than that. In fact, there are other estimates on the cost of robo-taxis that are lower than the ones that I quote here in this talk, like Barclays Capital study. But it's going to have a negative impact on vehicles. When you don't have as many accidents, you don't have as many people doing car repairs, and you don't sell as many vehicles if these vehicles are part of the sharing economy, another disruptive innovation. The global oil industry. If these are electric vehicles, it's going to have a real impact there. And it's not just going to be in the U.S. I'm talking about the U.S. with a lot of this talk, but believe me, in many ways, a lot of other countries are ahead of us on this technology. The automobile insurance company industry, if they're, and Warren Buffett said this is going to be great for people and bad for our auto insurance business. Local bus transit. Here's the problem there. If you look at local buses, you actually could use a robo-taxi and get where you're going for less than what you actually pay for the bus ticket. A lot of people don't realize there's a thing called a cash box ratio. Our taxes in Denver pay for about 75% of the cost of those buses. So the ticket people pay, big uproar over going to 260, that's only a quarter of the actual cost of delivering those services. Parking lots, car rental, taxis, EMTs. So what's going on in the auto industry? Ford is basically just made a $4.5 billion investment in electric vehicles. GM they actually started a whole company called Ford Smart Mobility to focus on that. GM bought a company called Cruise for $1 billion. They made a $500 million investment to get 10% of Lyft, but they also just announced to Wall Street Journal this morning that in 2017, they plan to do autonomous taxi trials with their Bolt vehicle, which is their new electric vehicle. And Mercedes and a raft of other companies are really on this pretty hard. So, first commercial availability. This does not mean these are going to be in Denver when the first commercial availability hits. For one thing, Denver has a snow issue, you may have noticed. It's really infrequent, but when it comes down, the problem isn't they make four-wheel drive versions of these vehicles. The problem isn't getting through the snow, it's seeing through the snow. If there's heavy snow, the LiDAR, the lasers that they use, can't see through that snow very effectively, but they are getting better at it all the time. So hopefully this won't delay things much. But you can see from this slide, there are a lot of different companies that are actively pursuing this technology. And I tell you, 2 years ago, a lot of these companies were not actively pursuing this technology. It is amazing how quickly they have made this shift. So a lot of times people ask me about the book. I'll leave this slide up. At $1.99 a book, this is an ebook. This is not my retirement plan. It's the lowest price I could make it on Amazon. And I would hope that if you're interested, you have a read of it. But, as I said, I'm passionate about this. I want as many people as possible to understand the changes that are ahead and how it's going to affect our lives and our communities. Thank you very much. Questions? And if they turn the house lights up, I could actually see you.
Hi, thank you for being here. I'm wondering where these cars are being manufactured and what kind of job growth or job opportunities there are by this kind of new technology.
That's a good question. Where are the cars going to be manufactured and what job opportunities will the manufacturer of the cars create? Well, if you're only manufacturing one car where before you were manufacturing 7, there is going to be a net loss in jobs in this industry. I am convinced of that personally. It won't be 7 to 1 because some of these cars will be sold directly and it will be a mix of those sorts of things. But we're not the only country in this business. BMW and Baidu in China are very aggressively pursuing a plan to actually deliver vehicles into the market in 2018 in China. And also they're planning to sell those here. You know, Google is hoping for 2018, but really targeting 2020. Google doesn't manufacture cars, but they just announced a cooperative agreement where Chrysler is going to take 100 of their minivans, and they're going to outfit and put driverless car technology, Google's technology, on those as a trial, as a test. So who's going to wind up leading this? Well, if I knew that, I'd be in great shape. I don't know the answer to that. But there are companies all over the world that are working on it.
Yes, there was an editorial in the Wall Street Journal on April 25th by Professor Henry Petrowski, Duke civil engineer professor, and written a history book of the road taken, the history and future of America's infrastructure, about roads in the interstate system. He's much less optimistic. He said maybe the easiest thing will be to build a driverless car. But he thinks that the biggest challenge to make the autonomous vehicles be functional, safe, and practical. He mentions Audi drove a car that was across country is over 90% accident-free, but when it got into construction zones, it got completely bewildered. You know,
yeah.
Compared to Google. But he also mentions local practice, like in New York City, they allow trucks to double park so they can make deliveries. And people, I watched it in New York City, they'll creep around the corner waiting for a red light. But in Denver, you double park a truck, you're going to get a ticket or have your truck towed. And if you creep around there are a myriad number of conflicting laws, like you can't turn right on a red light, at least in Wyoming. But
there's a lot of issues here. Let me try to address some of them. One of them is the issue of localization. I guarantee you, if you go to Italy and you're driving around in downtown Italy in Rome or something, it's a whole different world. It's a whole different world in Delhi when you're driving around. It's different in New York. It's different in New Orleans. There has to be localization of the software for every place that these cars go. That will delay the rollout of this technology all through the country and all through the world. But that's always the way it is. I mean, today, any international business knows they don't do business overseas the same way they do business here. And so these cars are not ready for prime time. And I hope I made that clear in what I had to say. This is something that's going to happen, but it is not deliverable today. There's still work to be done and still research to be done, like the snow issue that we have here. And so, but the thing about it is, there's a lot of money going into this. There's a lot of people and a lot of smart people trying to figure it out. And the rate of progress that we have seen in the last 5 years in this technology tells me that, 5 years from now, we're going to see some real commercial implementation. Yes?
For those that don't know me, I'm Bill James. I'm on the board of directors at RTD, and I know Rhett pretty well. The question I have for you, Rhett, is a public policy one. What would you recommend that RTD do in response to this trend?
Well, actually, I write about this in the book. If we look at the amount of money we spend on local buses, and much of that is subsidies from taxes, of course, if you took that money, you could create a service on light rail where you delivered a lot more people to light rail and just said, all right, eventually we'll phase out of the local bus service because you can't compete with these prices, right? And so you could still run some local buses that might be driverless buses, but it's still hard to imagine that door-to-door service is not going to win in the end. But what you could do with the money that you save, So it's not the money, you know, if you look at what you could do with the money you save, you could actually make light rail free. And we could really capitalize on this resource. Now imagine if you're trying to lure companies to move their headquarters here to Denver, if they could get free commuting of this quality for all of their employees, that is a pretty nice lure. And that makes Denver a lot more competitive.
Can we kill the other microphone, please? Can we turn it off? Oh, they're both on?
All right, good. So I think that's all our time for now. We have a promise to get out on time. But thank you very much.
Don't go away.
And Andre, I will stick around if anybody has questions they'd like to ask. I'm happy to stay and answer them.
Great. For $1.99, I have bought this book. I can listen to it on my iPhone or iPad. And it has all the videos with hyperlinks. And Rob, I do have here a silver dollar for you as a commemoration of your speaking to us today. And Rob, the day that they remove the crash dummies from the car and they're ready for human dummies, I'm first in line, okay?
Thank you, Andre.
Thank you.